my. Oh my. Joshua.
Hmm?
Joshua. All right.
Hmm?
Let's just do this. This is wow. Very late. And we're back. So tonight, folks, we're going to take some time and talk to you about A Link to the Past. And for the most part, I'm going to turn most of this over to Paul. But before to sort of like ask the questions that he wants and sort of because this is a patron pick. And so, as long as he doesn't like just lead us into a ditch, which will make me very sad, um, and I don't fall asleep, we'll be okay. But I did want to take before we got into that. I did want to talk a little bit just about like our personal histories with this game.
Yeah.
Um, and
So
it's
kind
sort
of
of
our own personal links to
don't do
Zelda's
it. Nope,
past.
nope, no,
Right. Yeah.
no, Josh, don't do that, Josh.
Okay.
I know you already did, but I'm just do not like,
Okay.
um, did not like. Um, that is a way of saying it that I would rather never be said again. But I did think it would be good to just examine our baggage with this game, and I'll sort of kick it off just to sort of like kind of like lay it out. But growing up, I didn't have a Super Nintendo. In fact, the the first Super Nintendo that I've owned, I actually got because it was my wife's Super Nintendo, and so yeah, but I did play a lot of Super Nintendo games. I just played them via emulation because I was uh, well, I was a pirate. Um,
Hmm.
and that was before, like, that was before we knew that downloading ROMs would basically, just give you a bajillion viruses. Um, it was the early days of the interwebs. And so I played a lot of Super Nintendo games, including A Link to the Past this way. Now, I had a friend who had a Super Nintendo, and that was the first time I ever played the game was on his Super Nintendo, and I played for a little bit. But obviously, like, I wasn't going to stay at his house to just play a game for 15 hours, 20 hours. That would have just been rude. So I had some experience with it, but it wasn't until I started emulating that I played the game, and I played through it at least once, possibly twice. But I liked it at the time. But to be honest, like I don't think I remembered as much of it. Like it was kind of like it was a season where I was just like chewing through because I was like
Okay.
Chrono Trigger, Secret of Mana, Secret of Evermore, Terranigma, like anything from the Super Nintendo, or like the Shadowrun, the Super Nintendo Shadowrun game, like just anything I could get. Like I played like dozens of really awful Dragon Ball Z fighting games and Gundam fighting games. Like they were not good fighting games. They were just especially and trying to play a fighting game on mouse and keyboard is not ideal. I'm just throwing that one out there. Um, but yeah, so but I remembered liking it, but not being so like sort of gobsmacked by it,
Hmm.
because I think like frankly, I was kind of being overwhelmed by like things like Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy VI, and Seiken Densetsu 3 and stuff like that. So I would just say like revisiting this, I was like, I knew I liked the game, and I just didn't realize how big an impact, like how formative it really was until like sort of thinking about this. I was listening to some retrospective stuff, and I was like, oh, there was also sorts of things being pointed out to me that was like, oh no, that's where I got this from. So it's like that's my thing. Like it's been 30 years since I played this thinking game, and I forgot how foundational it really is. And yeah, I've never owned it. Well, that's not true. I've since bought it digitally several times, but yeah.
Nice.
So that's my baggage.
Yeah.
I was a
Cool.
dirty rotten pirate. How about you, Josh? What's your
There you go.
baggage?
Well, I have owned this game in a number of different forms throughout the years. Mainly playing it as a kid. I did
Just
have
to
it.
clarify, I do
Mhm.
own it legally now in
Right,
several
right.
different
Yes,
formats.
you said that you bought it digitally multiple times. Yes, and I have as well. But I do have the physical Super Nintendo cartridge. I remember playing through that when I was a kid. It's in the basement right now. So I do have some fond memories of this game. It was not my first Zelda game. That goes to Link's Awakening. And then I want to say I played the first Zelda before this one, probably even Zelda 2 before this one. But Link's Awakening was the first Zelda game, which is odd because it doesn't have Zelda. It doesn't have a lot of kind of the tropes of Zelda games, although it does heavily borrow from this one, A Link to the Past. So while I do have very fond memories of it, I don't recall playing it like very often. A lot of Super Nintendo games, you'd kind of memorize the first few levels if you owned it because you'd be replaying it a lot. But this one, I don't remember restarting very often, probably just because of the save files and stuff like that. But I have played it a number of times, even from when I was younger. So this playthrough, it was fun to reminisce on a lot of the things because yes, it did feel very familiar. I have a lot of the same thoughts of what you mentioned, Nate, of just how foundational that this game is for just the formula of what a Zelda game is. I recognize, it's a huge step forward, especially after the first two games. So there's a number of things there, but I have played this, since I was quite young, beating it back then. It was never like, oh, this is the pinnacle of Zelda for me. I think that's because I played Link's Awakening first, but I've always known that it's a solid Zelda game and that it's very well regarded. Like often the internet will put this as a top Zelda game. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Wesley, what's your baggage with the this video game?
I mean, basically, I'm like 95% same with Josh, honestly. Like, not my first Zelda game. Again, that goes to the superiority of Link's Awakening, and it will forever be the most superiorist Zelda game ever invented, period. Um, so, played that quite a lot on the Game Boy. Loved it. Played the first two on the Nintendo because, of course, they are the ones with the gold cartridge. Like, you want to play the gold cartridge games because those have to be better than the gray cartridge games, obviously. So you try it, and then you realize you really stink because you don't have the instruction manual that actually has the map, and you don't have any copies of Nintendo Power. So clearly, you're not going to get very far in Zelda 1 or Zelda 2. That being said, Link to the Past, I still think to this day is probably my second favorite Zelda game. And there are times I think I might go back and forth between Link's Awakening and Link to the Past, but in the end, it's obviously going to be Link's Awakening. It's going to be the top game. That being said, Link to the Past, fantastic. I have played it. I might have played it the most out of all of us. I don't know how many times Paul has actually completed it, but it's one of those games that I would go back to like every couple months when I was a kid because, it would cycle through different systems. And I was one of those cool kids that would have like a Super Nintendo and a Sega Genesis and a PlayStation. We were just apparently rich beyond belief. I don't know where we got any of these games, honestly, unless my parents are thieves and they still haven't told me this. But Link to the
What
Past
they didn't let you know is that they were actually international jewel thieves.
Right.
could still be the truth today. Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? But yeah,
What's
I probably beaten this game more times than I can count, and I can point back to like very specific areas and how it made me feel at the time as a kid, just being able to uncover things that maybe even my brothers haven't actually beaten because they liked it, but they were never great at it, and they were never really enjoying it as much as they enjoyed their PlayStation games. But for me, it was always one of those things that I could just go hide in my room and play Super Nintendo, and Link to the Past and Super Mario RPG were right there for me. And Super Mario World, of course, which is the better of the two Mario side-scrolling games.
Your slander will not be tolerated here. Like you're allowed to be wrong in a lot of ways, but that slander
Yeah.
will not stand.
Someday I might be wrong too, but until then, I am going to be correct and remain correct in that assessment. But yeah, there's no baggage other than the fact that Nintendo Power comic is like the best thing ever made by human hands, and Shotaro Ishinomori is an absolute legend. And the fact that they got him to make a comic specifically for an American propaganda magazine is unbelievable. Just unbelievable. Rest in peace.
If listeners don't know how special Nintendo Power was back in the day, it was spectacular. It was just great.
Mhm.
For a giant advertisement that you paid for. But-
Yeah, but
It's
I
like
mean,
streaming services today.
it was like one of those things where the magazine racks, like when your mom, like this was like a whole thing, but like Paul, when your parents would go to the grocery store and you'd have to go
Mhm.
with them, and you would just wander over to the magazine racks.
Oh,
If
yeah.
Nintendo Power was there, I was flipping straight to the back,
Yeah.
straight to the back, and then I just read the rest of the magazine there at the store. Um, yeah, because that's what kids do. Um, but Paul, so this is your pick. What's your baggage, my guy?
All right, so this is one of the reasons I love this game so much. I got to set the stage a little bit because you youngins don't understand. But so I played the first two Zeldas on Nintendo when they were new, gold cart and everything, and the the Super Nintendo had come out the year before this game did. The first Super Nintendo games, like it was a definite graphical upgrade and feeling upgrade, but it it wasn't so evident yet. Like, when they were ending the NES cycle, like they had gotten really good at graphics for that system, like Mario 3. Um in the beginning, like Mario World, they weren't beginning of the SNES, they weren't very good at graphics. And so, Mario World's graphics are kind of mediocre. Um when this came out in 92, just that opening sequence, everything about it, the swirling a Triforce, the sword coming down, the harp arpeggios going into the cymbal crash and the da, 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 it was just that moment alone was something that, like, I hadn't seen stuff like that before in like a home video game.
Mhm.
And it was such just drastic upgrade from what had come before. It took the kind of the overhead view of Zelda 1, but um worlds prettier. Um More inviting, more complex, the world itself. Uh the individual areas were just uh so well thought out, the whole world so well planned that you get this kind of Metrovania, um crisscrossing of the worlds as you're getting upgrades, and you can get a little bit farther in each section. It was just something that we that was miles ahead of what had come before. And I just absolutely fell in love with the game and played it a few times that summer. I've probably beaten it like 5 or 6 times. So the average Henshin dad's probably beaten it more, but it is one of those games I absolutely love. I actually got it before Final Fantasy, well, what we called Final Fantasy 2 at the time, even though Final Fantasy 2 was actually at the end of 91, um, had come out in America. But I got Final Fantasy 2 later, and that title sequence has kind of a similar feel to it, but particularly the music. But yeah, just everything about this game just got burned into my brain. The every note of the music, every scene, uh, it just stuck with me. So definitely, definitely my favorite Zelda game of all the ones that I've played, which are 4 of them. But
What's the fourth? What's the fourth?
Ocarina.
You haven't even played Link's
Mm.
Awakening?
No.
Oh, get off the show. What are you doing here?
Sorry.
Oh my gosh. I've never been more disappointed in you than I am right now.
It's
I just
well, that's
bought
how
Breath of the
Paul and I
Wild for
felt
my
about
son.
when you said that you never watched Firefly. So be careful, young man.
Very true.
But yeah, I just think sort of going back to that, like I really wish I had more of that kind of experience, Paul, where wish I had sort of been like I remember that first time like playing it at my friends and being like, "Oh, this is so cool." But it wasn't like magical,
Mhm.
and it's like I do think like in going back to this game, I do think it is kind of like it is oddly special. Like it is I think it is that just like that sort of like the late Nintendo, like late NES just into the Super Nintendo to the late Super Nintendo gen is like there's some real magic in that generation.
For sure.
And uh I mean, I've ranted and raved about just how like, I kind of and it's mostly for show, but it's also like a little bit like unhinged rant where I'm just angry about the hook shot not being in Breath of the Wild. But this was the game that gave us the hook shot.
Mhm.
And I just kind of like and for me it's like one of the things I think we talked about is like just looking back at the game, I realized like how fun like this game defines for me. Like I don't have like that magical like, oh, this game sort of like I fell in love with it, but I do like it casts the mold for like this is what I expect out of a Legend of Zelda game. I expect sort of like this tiered progression where it's like you get a few tools and we add a few tools and there's a temple and you get a few tools and you know what I'm saying? And there's this constant like kind of like here's a few blocks and here's a few more blocks and here like that mix of like the puzzle dungeons and every like
Right.
masterful execution across the board. And like I think like the other thing is like this game's like basically about 20 hours to play through. Um and that's pretty accessible, pretty doable. And I would say even like the just the modern iterations, like it's a really pretty looking game, even in modern, you know, modern TVs and everything. Like like
Yeah.
it's it's one of the ones where like the pixel art doesn't suffer
Mm-hmm.
on
Right.
you know. So
Like
yeah,
even down to like individual flowers and blades of
yeah,
grass that you can actually see like moving, like
yeah.
actively, like this whole world is actually moving. It's like just a beautiful painting. It's
It's
wonderful.
it's masterfully realized. Like the more I've been looking at it and like just on my Switch even, I'm like, no, this might be the most visually impressive SNES game, flat out. Like just everything that it does, like I yeah, it's like the little animations. I'm just like, dude, they didn't need to animate those flowers, but they did.
Yeah.
And so it's like little touches like that and just like the aesthetic is gorgeous. Like I was looking at a tree and like because like there's lots of trees in this game, but I was looking at one of those trees and I'm like, and granted you see hundreds of that model, like they just kind of repeat and reuse the asset over and over again, but it is an absolutely drop dead gorgeous. Like I was like, this is a really beautiful sprite or series of sprites,
Yep.
depending on, but like it's just it's gorgeous, like, and it's just incredibly well realized.
Yeah.
Like,
Except for Link's pink hair, but everything
well,
other than that.
I'm glad you brought that up because you know what? I think like it was a bit of like Nintendo being prophetic. They just knew that in 30 years there'd be a bunch of people with pink mullets, that would be, and they were just like, we're gonna like put our stamp on this, and so 30 years from now, we're gonna be like, oh no, we did that first.
You
Like,
can trust those people to be the hero of time. Yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
yeah. So
Before we jump off of graphics, I know this is a little bit into the story, um, but I very much consider the drawing of the Master Sword in this game to be one of the greatest moments in video game
oh
history. Just the running of the woodland animals in that scene.
Yeah,
You go in and it's all
that's super cool.
foggy, and the light coming out of it and clearing the fog away. It's so well so well conceived, so well programmed. And like I mean, I've finished the game 5 or 6 times. I've started the game probably something closer to 20, and I've hit that point, and just it moves me every single time.
yeah,
It's such a great scene.
Hmm.
I
Yeah,
think.
yeah. There's a lot of great scenes throughout this. Sorry, if you wanted to continue talking about that, that's fine.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, I think that the only sort of like, well, and that even sets the store for like or sets the stage for just the Master Sword. Like it introduces the Master Sword, but then it sort of sets a pretty high bar that I think the only other Zelda game, frankly, in my opinion, that touches that sort of like gravitas is Ocarina of Time when you get the Master Sword. Like that's the
Which is
only other one.
interesting that you say that because it's like completely like a different style and mood going along. Because at least this
Oh,
point, when in Link to the Past, you get the Master Sword and it feels like, oh, triumphant. Everybody's like super excited about it. Ocarina of Time, you get the Master Sword and you're just like, oh, it turned into Resident Evil really quickly.
yeah, well, but there's two
Yeah.
very different vibes. But just I'm
Mhm.
saying like it's kind of, to me it is interesting that, frankly, none of the other Zeldas, like finding the Master Swords outside of Ocarina of Time, really resonate. Like I'm like, oh yeah, I found the Master
Mm.
Sword. Like move on. But like,
Not even Wind Waker. I would say
um,
that's like a really close second. That Wind Waker sequence where the whole castle wakes up, basically. That was
man,
amazing.
now I'm like, hmm.
Rating
I
Master Swords.
rating Master Sword pools. They're all pretty good. I just think it's
Mhm.
like it is kind of interesting. I just think it's
Mhm.
interesting that they set the bar so high,
Yeah, that's
and
true.
that it is, yeah, and it's like in some ways it's still I almost feel like all the other Master Sword withdrawals, like, or finds or whatever, are struggling to capture something comparable. And like I said, I think Ocarina of Time, like I just, for that, it was like the transforming from Kid Link into
Mhm.
Adult Link. I was like, yo,
That's pretty cool.
that's pretty sick. Um, so
You cannot see it from, well, first of all, because it's really far away, but also because I have Christmas decorations over it. But I have a portrait of Link behind me, but right on the side of the portrait, I made a perler of him listing the
Mhm.
Link
Mhm.
to the Past Link holding the Master Sword up.
mm,
Because yeah, that's very intentional that I picked that scene, because that had such a huge impact on me.
Mhm.
yeah, it's yeah, it's just and it's just moments like that that it's just like, man, this game is a lot stickier than I think I've given it credit for in the past. So
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I think of a number of different scenes and moments throughout the game that to me feel very iconic. You mentioned Paul earlier, just the opening of the game. You pop the game in the Super Nintendo. Dun, 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 dun. Like it's just just that opening brings back a lot of memories for me. But
Yep.
even the opening of once you start a file and it's
Yeah.
raining, and or I
Oh,
mean
the
it does go
rain.
through, it goes through the history of Hyrule. It does that.
Right.
That's really cool. But it's raining, your uncle gets up and he's like, don't follow after me, or I'm gonna go, but be careful. And then you're sneaking around the castle, like that whole opening section. And like I said, it's not that I've played it 100 times, but I know I've played that opening quite a number of
Yeah.
times.
yeah, I've
Um,
played that opening sequence probably dozens of times.
mhm.
And
It's really good.
that's another point where like this is something at the time we had not really seen before.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so coming out of the eh, NES era, having okay, they might have rain, but just the feel of that of the rain in the game,
Yeah, there's
that's
thunder,
so
you know.
that's rendered
Yeah.
so nicely. It's
Mhm.
it was. I think they put it at the beginning of the game on purpose because they're showing off. They're like, look what our new system can do.
Sure.
Look
Yeah.
what we can do now. But it
I mean,
works.
it's
It's
even
so
down to
good.
like individual raindrops just like exploding on
Yeah.
the ground. It's unbelievable. The atmosphere that it sets up is just unparalleled. Like I haven't played
Mhm.
a game since then that can set that kind of atmosphere in the same way.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
And then when your uncle, tells you that Princess Zelda is and then he passes out, and you need to remember that moment because it is never brought up again, and you have no idea through the game
What is it that he was gonna
what
say?
he was about to say.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, real
Hopefully not his
Darth
sister.
Vader moment there.
Right? Well,
That would have been kind of important.
that sequence is real
Awkward.
good.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I think of, when you first go to the Dark World also, and how jarring, like that's really impactful in a different way, because it's like you felt so strong up to that point, and the game's relatively easy up to that point. And then it feels like it's all stripped away, and it feels like you're in this barren wasteland, and there are these crazy
You're a
like
silly,
demonic creatures
stupid
all
little
around you,
bunny.
and yeah,
Mhm.
it's
That's a really good point because once you get the Master Sword in the light world, there's not really anything in the light world that can stand in your way.
right.
You're just mowing things down, and
Mhm.
and it feels powerful.
Mhm.
Like you feel like you're accomplished, and then Dark World, and it's like, oh no, it's not. I mean, it's not a hard game, but it does throw you in and makes you feel like you're level 1 again.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. Especially before you can even attack, when you're just this little bunny.
Oh yeah, that's part 2. Yeah, for sure.
Uh, yeah. So I think there are a number of things, which is I think you alluded to this, Nate, where even though it's been a really long time since I've played this game, there are just moments throughout it that are kind of etched in my memory. Whether or not they're just iconic for the series in general, or it's just specific to this game. I think, yeah, there's a few different scenes throughout it that, like, yeah, it hits pretty hard, and it's very memorable. So
Mhm.
All right.
Well, nice.
Well, Paul, now is I'm gonna say, where do you want to go with this? Like, I'm
Yeah.
sure that you have some things that you really want us to hit. So lead the charge,
Um
my friend.
I the main thing the main thing that I love about this game and I think is something that sets Zelda even the NES titles apart from other uh other titles developed by Nintendo directly are the bosses. Mario has always had kind of crappy boss fights but great levels. Zelda's always had great boss fights. And this game, what's always stands out to me about this game is I like nearly all the dungeons, but just the fights, uh, the the creativity of the boss fights, and so I did have a list, um of the dungeons you go through. I guess very quickly, if you're not familiar with the game and are just have no idea what the plot is, we mentioned before, it's like you get woken up in the middle of the night, your uncle's leaving with a sword, and he's like, I'm going to get some cigarettes, I'll be back in the morning. He ain't coming back, buddy. uh um
by
but
the way, Zelda is your
you get woken up because
It wasn't the castle guards that got him. It was that 6-pack a day habit.
right. Um, uh, Zelda contacts you telepathically and wakes you up and tells you to go to the castle. And when you get there, um, you find your uncle's been stabbed, and you take his sword and shield, and you start going to rescue Zelda. If anybody has not read it, get the comic book, because this whole scene is hardcore, where Aghanim himself is the one who kills your uncle, and it's pretty great art. But uh, yeah, from there you manage to rescue Zelda. You hear that you got to do some stuff around, but you got to get these three pendants in order to prove yourself worthy to get the Master Sword, which is the only thing that can block Aghanim's magic. Um, as you go through those, as you get the Master Sword, then Zelda is being kidnapped by Aghanim, and you go to the castle um, to rescue her. This is very real in 1992. There were a lot of people, even though it's kind of hinted at in the book, there were a lot of people thought this was the end of the game. And it was a massive surprise when it just like, oh no, we're not even halfway done. You know, uh, because you get sent into the dark world, where Aghanim is sending all these maidens so that he can revive this thief who has been warped by the power of the Triforce in the dark world, Ganon, who we all know and
Well,
love.
and that's the thing is like, honestly, if you get the medallions, you get the Master Sword, and you fight Aghanim, and that was the game, I think the game would have felt like a little short, but it would have
Short,
felt
yeah,
okay.
yeah,
It would have been like, I'm not gonna be mad about this. But the fact that, like, yeah, they do sort of just say, but wait, there's more in the best possible way, is there's like, you know, that's a real neat trick, you know?
right.
Like,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, and so you go through that. You face Aghanim again, um, who does manage to resurrect Ganon, and you give up because there's no hope in that, and that's always where I turn off the game. It's like, I'm not facing that guy. But I kind of wanted to, if just kind of quickly um, go through the dungeons, and briefly tell about the bosses, and if y'all have any thoughts on it, please jump in, because this is the part that I really love about this game.
Okay. Mhm.
All I know
Uh,
is I love the power glove. It's so
it's
bad.
so bad, yeah. uh, the first dungeon you go to is the Eastern Palace, and you pick up the bow there, and like you're expecting, a lot of times you're going to use the weapon you find in a dungeon against the boss. And there you face the Armos Knights, who are these six bouncing giant knight things that circle around the room. I thought it was a pretty. I love this as an opening boss because it's like super intimidating, but they're not actually very hard.
Hmm.
And so, as long as you start pelting them with arrows, they're going to fall pretty quickly. But just the first time you walk in there, and these just six giant things are stomping at you, is pretty cool.
Hmm. And the sound effect that like pops up as soon as you hit them with the arrow, it's like that. Vroom, vroom. Josh, put the clip
Yes,
in. Okay, it's really good.
Yeah.
That sound
yeah,
effect just
that
is
will.
like it's so
Oh,
good.
the sound
the
effects in general in this game they're just great.
Hmm.
yeah, I was gonna
Hmm.
say the sound design in
Satisfying.
this game, period, is, I mean, and it gives us, like, dude, one of the things I was listening to today said, oh, like, this is where that iconic da 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 da, like, the like when
Mm.
you open the chest, you get that,
Yeah,
like, little trill kind of thing. Like, this is where that came from, and it's like, oh yeah, like, that's sick. Um,
yeah.
Well, the
Oh,
the
that
original Zelda, it was the da-na-na-na. You
But
still
this
get
is
that in the original one. It's lower. It's
but
not.
this
It's
yeah.
one
not as
this one
shiny
is
sounding.
like the one that like this is like the real root
Yeah,
of that. Like
Okay. Yeah.
the one that's stuck in everyone's head for sure.
yes, this is the one that like when you think of that sound, like this is
That's
the one
true.
you
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
of.
This
Mhm.
is the one. Uh, yeah, it should be noted in all these dungeons. Again, most of the dungeons I really like. Eastern Palace I really like.
Mhm.
But in these dungeons, you find certain treasures. The map, the compass, which tells you, which is worthless because it's pretty obvious where the boss is every single time. But and then the big key, and then you find a big giant treasure chest, which always has the real treasure of the dungeon in it. And so you're kind of hunting for these four things before even going to the boss every time. Um, After that, you get the boots, and then you can start running, which was the first time was just like
Best
amazing feeling.
item in every Zelda game, any Zelda
Yeah,
game,
for
other than the
sure.
hook shot, the Pegasus boots. Love it.
Yeah, they're pretty sick.
Uh, so Desert Palace, you get the Power Glove, and then fight Lenmola, which are three snakes, and that are it. And this whole dungeon is deserty, and so there's a lot of monsters that go under the sand and then pop up, and these three come at you and fly around the room. And so they're I always had of the light world bosses, I always had the worst time with this one, and I think most people had the worst time with Moldrum, but
Yeah, I
we're
I actually
we're gonna get to
just did that
Moldrum.
this fight the other day, and I was like, oh, this is not fun. It's not hard, but
Yeah,
yeah, that like in comparison to that first boss fight, where it's like it's not hard, but it feels like a little more impactful. Like you've got the six statues like stomping down at you,
yeah,
right? That feels like a little more whatever. Like this one is just like this feels kind of like just dumb and not fun. Like
yeah.
they're hard to hit. Um, yeah, it's just yeah. I didn't think it was very good.
This is my least favorite of the light worlds for sure.
Well,
Um,
and you don't do anything with the power glove. Like it would be one thing like if the power glove was more part of
of that fight,
that
yeah,
fight, but
but you don't.
it's not.
No,
So it's like I don't know.
So it's emulating the real world Power Glove a lot.
Where it just doesn't
Basically
live up to the
useless.
hype.
it's bad. We all know this.
It's it's so bad. Yeah. So
Yeah. You head out up into the mountains, which I love the trek into the mountains. It the whole trek feels weighty and dangerous. Um, but getting over to the Tower of Hera, and you find the moon pearl there, which does allow you to go into the dark world without changing shape, which you've already experienced that you turn into a little bitty bunny. And
well, to get to get to the tower, you have to step into that portal
right, yeah, yeah,
and then move over to a spot, and you get this like you basically when you're climbing up the mountain, you find that old man, and when you help him get through to his spot, he gives you the mirror,
right. Which
and
will
so
get you
you
back.
to get you back,
Right.
and so yeah, so
Yeah. But this is the I look. I watch a lot. I've watched a lot of randomizers and speed runs of this game, and Moldorm um is always the light world boss that I found the most interesting, and I it seems like everyone else hates him. And so I'm curious as to y'all's reaction to this guy. This is he's kind of a snake-like creature too, but while every other boss fight you either live or die, um, this one tries to just push you off the edge, and if you fall off the edge, then you go down to the floor below, and you have to go back up, and he's restored to full health after you come back up, and so
I hate this
yes,
boss. There
Oh
is
wow.
I'm telling
Okay.
you.
nothing that drives me nuts in a video game more than feeling like I wasted time. And I'm sitting there, I'm beating this guy to death, but I take one wrong turn, he pops me right off, all the way down, to come all the way back up. Stupid. Hate him.
Mhm.
Die in a fire.
All right.
Okay, that's.
Other than that,
I
the
was gonna
dungeon's
say,
pretty fun. It's okay.
I
The
think
dungeon's good.
he's a little annoying, but I didn't think he was. I don't like the design, right? But I didn't think the actual fight was that bad. You know.
He's also bouncy when you actually hit him. You bounce
Yeah.
off of
Sure.
him a
Yeah.
lot, and so the whole gimmick of the fight is keeping your balance on the platform. Which so he does like he's a little unfair at times, and
Mm-hmm.
will get you into a corner that you cannot get out of, which is a little bit jerky. I don't think there's much about this game that's unfair, but that point is at least it's not a death, but yeah,
When
it's
you're
it's
5 years
cheap.
old trying to play this stupid game and this boss knocks you out, this boss can go suck farts.
That is fair.
Hate him. Hate him.
Gosh. Um, once you get the pendants from these three bosses, then you get the Master Sword and head to Hyrule Castle to save Zelda, which is the point of the game, and you finally encounter Aghanim and the wizard who um I always thought this was a fun fight. He shoots his little magic projectiles at him, but the Master Sword and also the net can reflect them back to him. In case y'all are ever doing a randomizer where you don't have the Master Sword, you can also use the net against Aghanim,
Hmm.
which is weird. I don't know why they programmed it like that, but yeah, you're trying to hit his shots back to him. I don't think it's a particularly hard fight. I think, but it's a pretty cool one.
Yeah. That's it reminds me kind of like that fight, the design kind of reminds me of like a breakout a little bit, or like Pong,
Mm-hmm.
but a little more dynamic. And I really appreciate like that sort of like that, whether it's intentional or unintentional, that like callback. It's like where it's like the fight is literally you just like volleying that ball of energy
Yeah,
until somebody drops it, or screws it up. So, and there's something kind of charming about that. So,
Mhm. It's super fun. Yeah.
yeah,
yeah.
it's a cool. It's a very. It's that might be like one of my like just like because it's simple in execution, but it's like it feels really good. It's fun. It's a
It's
lot of
fun.
fun.
It's a fun fight. It
Yeah,
definitely is.
yeah.
That and so like and this is why I like these fights. So we've had four bosses so far. We think it's the end of the game. It's not, but these are four distinct strategies that you're going to need to employ. You have to you have to approach all four fights differently, and that's what I think this game does really well with the bosses. Um, but heading over into the dark world, we have Palace of Darkness. You get the hammer, and you have to fight Helmassar King, um, which is an interesting fight because you have to break his helmet off of him first before you can access his weak point. And he has a tail that's going to whip around at you, and pretty uh, fun fight.
Yeah, I was just gonna say like and this is like this is kind of where I'm a little foggy because again it's been a long time, but he's the only boss that you do that with though, right? You never have to like sort of crack something open to get to that weak spot.
Oh, you kind of need to do that with Trinex, because once you kill two of his heads, then his shell will break, and he comes the middle head comes out of there,
Mm,
but not in the same way. It's completely different
yeah,
feel to it. But yeah, yeah, this is a fairly unique mechanic for it.
Yeah, that's it. That's kind of a what it was like. It was like, yeah, they well, and I think as a general rule, they never revisit the same thing twice. It's like each one of the boss experiences, like there might be like notes where it's a little similar, but it's each one of these boss experiences is pretty radically different.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right. Well, my favorite dungeon and one of my favorite bosses is Swamp Palace. Not just because you get the hook shot there, but that's a big part of it. I love
Hook
this
shots
dungeon.
rule.
And you face Argus in this, and it's got a cool mechanic where you have to hook shot its little protector eyes and pull them away from the main body, and then kill them. And then once Argus himself is revealed, then he'll kind of swim around the room, and you have to hit him. Um, this whole dungeon is fun to me. There's a lot of switches, water switches, where you're flooding certain areas and draining certain areas. And then once you get the hook shot, then you're bouncing on the upper level for back and forth from everything. So that's my favorite dungeon. I love hanging out there. Um, Once you head into Skull Woods, you get the fire rod and fight Mothula, who is one
Totally
of the
not
two
Mothra. Totally not Mothra.
one of the two fights, one of the two boss fights I do not like. Um, but he's kind of a jerk, and you're on a moving floor, and he's he's flying around, and there's spikes on the floor that keep moving back and forth at you, and it always kind of felt like I was just swinging my sword randomly around the room until I beat him, trying to just dodge things.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, and I wanted to take a second here. You mentioned that you get the fire rod, and you can get the ice rod or the ice staff earlier,
yeah,
significantly earlier on in the game. But like, I gotta be honest, like the staves never really rated for me as far as like weapons.
no.
So
And I'd say that about all of Link's magic in this game, because you can get three magical pendants as well to cast screen wide magic, and I didn't really use them except to open things, which
Yeah.
sometimes you get to a place where it has the symbol and you cast that spell and it opens things up. But yeah, I tended to go sword and shield most
Hmm.
to most everything.
Yeah.
The staves become really important against Trinex, which is the other boss I do not like. Um, uh, but yeah, otherwise there's a lot of magic items that get used like once or twice,
Hmm.
and um, I
And
didn't just really use them that much.
I would say that'd be like one of the main weak parts of the game is that you have so many of these things that are after the fight with Aghanim, and you're unlocking it as you're going through the 8 palaces or however many there were.
Hmm.
I don't even remember. That's just like, how often do you actually use them? Not too often, and they just kind of seem like they're there just for the sake of being there.
Right.
So it's a little bit of
Uh,
bloat where it doesn't need to be.
the fire rod at least could light lamps from a distance,
Hmm.
and
Yeah. Helps with puzzles. Yeah.
yeah, the ice rod not so much, but um, again, you're going to need it. You hopefully have found it by now, because you will need it against Trinex. Um, Thieves Town, I thought, was a fantastic dungeon with a truly unique mechanic where you're in there looking for the boss. You've probably already even entered the boss's room. He's not there. You've heard rumors from the beginning of the game about this thief boss named Blind, and just keep hinting at him. And you're just going through this whole dungeon. You find the Titan's Mitten there, which is an upgraded power glove, and you finally get to the bottom, and there's this this girl down there who's just been captured. And you're like, okay, well, I'm gonna lead her to safety. Um, but along the way, you need to blow up the floor with a bomb to let light into the boss's room. And if you bring the girl into the light, surprise, surprise, it's actually blind in disguise. And I thought this was a really neat, quirky mechanic uh, to kind of vary up the dungeons a bit.
Mhm.
Um,
And it kind of flies in the face of what happened at the beginning of the game, because you think, oh, girl in dungeon, save the girl. There you go.
Save the
That's the
girl.
whole mission of the
Right.
game, right?
Yep, a little bit of subversion of expectations there. Yeah.
Just like The Last Jedi.
Ice Palace, you get the blue mail there. You face Cold Stare.
Ice Palace sucks.
Ice Palace is Ice
It
Palace
can
is
it can go kick rocks. It can suck farts. It
I-
is
every-
it is
every
the
time-
equivalent of like modern day water temples. Like it's
Oh yeah, for sure.
hot garbage.
Yeah.
For sure. The game does keep track of the number of times you die, and at the end it will tell you. Ice Palace is always number one for me. Just,
Right.
it's so big. It's so
Right.
big. I still like it. It's interesting. It's got some neat mechanics to it, but it's a heck of a dungeon.
Yeah.
Cold Stare is not that interesting of a boss, except in the way it moves. I really like how it uh once you break Cold Stare out of its ice and it splits into three and goes around the room, it always hovers kind of around the edges of the room, but its eyes are always at you until it can find a time to strike. That I thought was a really neat graphical representation of it. Even though as a boss, he's kind of he's not really doing a ton new.
Mhm.
Misery of Mire, you find another one of those magic items, the Cane of Samaria,
yeah.
which is actually a really great weapon that I didn't know until I started watching speed runs. It's so it will make a block, and then when you press it again, the block explodes in four directions, and
Oh, wow.
those magical firings are really strong.
Hmm.
And so placed in the right area, you can get 4 shots in 4 directions that are very powerful. I did not know this until the last 10 years, so that didn't help me.
Yeah.
Which again,
I
it's one of
didn't
those
know
late
that
game
until just now.
items. It's just like, oh, this would have been incredibly useful back in the desert. Like, come on.
Right, yeah. Vitreous is in this. This is a grouping of gross eyes in a pool of water.
Mhm.
The big eye in the middle will shoot lightning at you, and but you clear out the little ones first. That will shoot at you as well, but clear them out with some arrows, and then go after the big eye. I always liked this boss. I thought it was really cool looking. Neat approach.
Yeah.
Turtle Rock is the dungeon for me that can burn. That just like
Okay.
I hate
Kick
Turtle
farts,
Rock.
suck rocks.
Yes. It's you get the mirror shield in there, which is really nice, but there's so many laser eyes on the walls in this dungeon that just pop you. And the whole dungeon is a jerk. It's got a lot of magic mechanics of going, making yourself a little cart and going around a track on it, and then you walk right into flames because you didn't time it right and you can't turn back. And I don't like this dungeon. I don't like Trinex.
Yeah.
Trinex is this beast with 3 necks and 3 heads attached to those necks. One is cold, one is hot, and then the middle one. And this is where you need those canes. So you ice cane the hot one, and it will freeze, and then you can hit with your sword, and then you cold no, it opposite. It
Mhm.
does it it unfreezes. Then you cold ice cane the hot head. I may have gotten that mixed up. Y'all get the point.
Yeah.
Use ice
I
against
didn't.
fire, fire against ice.
It's like I didn't understand a word you said, but it made sense somehow.
And then once the two side heads are destroyed, then the center body will explode and the final head pops out of it like a turtle.
Mhm.
Thus Turtle Rock. And it the movement of this guy is really cool. Like, especially for the era, it moved nicely, and its weak point was in the middle of its body, but it would hurry around the room. I thought was really good. Finally, Ganon's Tower, where you fight Aghanim 2. Really good dungeon. A similar fight to Aghanim 1, but he has clones this time, but not a hard fight at all. Still fun one. And then Ganon reveals himself in the Pyramid of Power, and
What an early 90s name, the Pyramid of Power.
right. And he has a couple of phases. The really hard one is when he knocks down all the blocks around the edge, and so he can knock you off again, like Moldorm. If you get knocked off, he regains all of his hit points.
Yep.
And but when the lights go out, you have to light both lanterns, and then he'll freeze momentarily, and you have to shoot a silver arrow at him. And that's the hardest part of that. Just try, getting the right item in your hand at any given moment and keeping your magic up. But I always thought his was a cool fight, even though I fell several times. But several stages to him, and he was a fun challenge.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I enjoyed fighting him. He was a lot of fun. His tower was annoying because of how stinking long it was. It felt like it was three dungeons in one.
Right. It was. The tower is very long. And
I always thought the spinning trident looked really cool, honestly.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Ganon's spinning trident. Yeah, he fling that across the room at you, and it was neat. He was shooting like beams of fire and throwing tridents, and he was not happy with you at all as a person. Just disappointed in everything about you. It's
I think he's a bit upset, just a little bit.
Right.
Finally gets resurrected, and there's this punk with pink hair who just
this kid.
At least this one didn't have two Zeldas,
Right.
Two Zeldas. I think that one went over my head.
Just like the trident. At the end of Zelda 2, there's two Zeldas existing.
There are.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah. Because yeah.
We did a whole skit about it,
That's right.
Y'all look up the Retro Zoo Super Show and our original episode here. Both of those for those.
Mm-hmm.
But
you're citing the deep magic at this point.
But that was the main thing that really I wanted to mention about the game was I think the boss fights are super memorable. There's a ton in the overworld to exploring around the different areas, and you can find heart pieces around to increase your life, and a lot of different stuff you can do. But I've always been just really impressed, especially like going from Mario, which I love, but the boss fights are variations of themes coming to here, where there really is a unique mechanic to everyone that you're trying to figure out.
And I think they took that and ran with it a bit when they made Link's Awakening, because that whole final boss rush where you have the boss like literally morphing between the different bosses that you faced in the past, like all the shadow bosses.
Oh wow.
And you actually had to adjust on the fly. You're like, oh, what was that thing weak against? Okay, I got to figure this out real quick. Push start, hurry.
Right.
Yeah, but it was really well done in this game. And because like I because I was a little worried because you were saying like I'm going to bring up all the bosses, and I'm like, oh, I can't remember any of the bosses. But as soon as you start talking about them, I'm like, oh yeah, that one. Oh yeah, that one. I remember that. I remember how that made me feel. I remember that one could suck farts. Absolutely. Like,
Moldorm.
but they're so memorable.
Yeah. 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 Like even you had mentioned how you don't like Trinex, Paul. I didn't either, especially because you need to, like, you can't screw up because your magic is limited, you know, and you
Right.
need a lot of magic to take him down. So if you keep missing, like, you're done for. You can't beat him. So I found him pretty annoying. But that said, he is still very memorable. You know, like it's a cool conceit.
Oh
I
yeah,
just
it's a
was
very
frustrated
memorable
by him.
fight. Yeah. You know, for anybody possibly playing it for the first time, you really do need to find the little imp thing that will do the half magic cost.
Mm.
And there's a funny story about that from the time, because you know we didn't have internet to look these things up. Is when you find the imp thing, it says it's going to curse you, and that it's going to take away half of your magic, and then and it kind of wavers back and forth that it's going to get the spell wrong. And what it's actually doing is making your spells cost half the magic that it did before.
Hmm.
We did not know that. And like none of my friends were smart enough to go, okay, we're going to find the imp. I'm going to figure out how many times can I cast the fire rod with regular magic, and then how many times after we talk to the imp. Because we had discussions on the at recess and in school. It's like, is he having our magic or what is he doing? Like, should we be getting this guy or no? And we went back and forth on it. Because the dialogue is vague because the imp doesn't really know what he's doing. And yeah, before you get to Trinex especially, and you will also want it for Ganon, find that guy. I'm not going to tell you where he is. You can figure it out. There's the internet, people. Find that little guy, and he will help you out. Yeah, nicely.
I don't think I found him this playthrough. Because as I'm taking a look at him, I remember him from Link's Awakening. Not
is
so
he in
much
there
from
too?
this one. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. That bat looking dude.
Yeah.
Yes.
The other story that I'll tell at the time, and this is I'm not look, I am fat, but I'm not body positivity. You run across several fairies in the world, and by the time you get to like the third one, you think you know how it's going to happen. You hear the harps start going.
Mm-hmm.
But there's one fairy who's super fat. And the first time she showed up, I, as a 14-year-old kid, just could not stop laughing because I was not expecting that.
And there's no rhyme or reason for it either. It's just
No,
like, this is just
no,
how
not
it
at all.
is. And it's just
Right.
there, and it's played completely straight, and it's just like,
Right.
okay. Sure.
But she is one of the last fairies you find, and so I mean it's definitely intentional that they're setting up, because you visit the fairy several times because you want to the fairies will refill your empty bottles with potions. They'll upgrade your your boomerang, and I can't remember. I think they upgrade one other thing, but they do great stuff for you, and as well as healing you. So you definitely want to visit them several times. But finding that last one, just I could not stop laughing. I was not expecting that at all. All right, so there's 5,000 other things I could say about this game, but Anything y'all want to add before we shut it down? Because if y'all don't know about Link to the Past yet, this is one you should be playing.
Mhm.
Um, I did want to kind of reiterate that this game is the one that sort of is the template for all the, like, this is the definitive Zelda. I think for me in so many ways that, and again, and I had already sort of talked about this a little bit, but like it's especially sort of in replaying it and listening to other stuff talk about it, like, and just like even as you're going through like the different like the monster designs and everything else, like this sets the table for every Zelda that came after it. I mean, up until Breath of the Wild, which kind of in some ways abandons the form, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like loads of temples really, and I guess like it's in some ways it is like sort of a redo on the original uh Legend of Zelda, like,
Sure.
but it goes above and beyond, and I don't know. I think I think this is like one of the, this is definitely to me one of those games that like when Byron is old enough, like we're gonna do a Link to the Past playthrough.
Mhm.
Like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and it's like because like, well, that's if he wants to play video games, you know, like I imagine he will. Um but yeah,
Fortnite.
it's a hard pass. Hard, this is not a Fortnite house. But yeah, I think, you know, just in sort of thinking about that, and again, it just it does add so many sort of like quality of life things, like the boots, um
Mhm.
you know, the oh daggone it, but my brain skipped a beat
The
there.
hook shot.
the the
The
hook
hooks.
shot, obviously, you know, and it's like even like the I no I in was it it's the power bracelet in Link's Awakening, right?
I think so. Yeah, pretty sure.
But like, you know, the sort of like the power glove, and then the Titans mitt or whatever, when you get those, and like the upgrades, like the just the removing obstacles, like picking up rocks,
Hmm.
and you know, like things like that, that I don't know.
The feeling that you get when you're only able to pick up the small rocks for most of the game, and then you get that Titan's mitt, and then you can pick up one of those big freaking boulders, and just like, and it takes a second. It's like it's trying to lift it, and it's like boom, brings it right up above his head. It's just like, oh, I did that. I feel
Yeah.
accomplished now. I actually
Yeah,
did
it's
And
pretty
what
something.
cool.
and what a great what a great animation, because
Hmm.
it's the right amount of effort.
Yeah,
You see the sweat coming off of Link's forehead as
Hmm.
he's doing it.
there's
But
a slight
like you
hesitancy. It's just like, is it gonna
right.
happen? Will it? And then it does, and it's like, oh, it feels so
It's
satisfying.
right. It it doesn't go too long. It's not too short.
Hmm.
It you feel the effort of it, but also it moves along with it.
Hmm.
It's really
I would
good.
I would also say like there's things in this game that I forgot, and that the game doesn't do a lot of like holding your hand. Now, I would say there's a lot more like tutorialization. Um, yeah, that's the right word I'm looking for. Tutorialization in this that is pretty good. It's not like beating you over the head, but
Hmm.
it's like I forgot that you could use the Pegasus boots to like run into, you know, because there's those piles of rocks,
Oh yeah,
and you could run into those and
break
explode
those.
them, and they're like they're hidden doorways and stuff. Like I was like, oh, it's like touches like that are so cool, and so like it's little things like that, and just, you know, it is kind of unfortunate because it, like, you know, a lot of, you know, we talked briefly about the staves and how towards like by the time you get them they're not really useful,
Hmm.
and just even magic and just all of that is not really, it's not really that viable. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
well, that's not true. Like those magic attacks when used properly are better than like your base sword attack,
Sure.
but so much of the game really just like you are just like, it's like I'm gonna poke things, and I'm gonna poke things with my sword, and I'm gonna swing, you know,
Hmm.
club the bad guys to get to death per se, and it's just I don't
Yeah.
know.
Oh,
That's like the one gig that I would probably
Mhm.
throw at it, is that you don't like, the bow is pretty useful, boomerang is pretty useful, hookshot is pretty useful. And outside of that, you don't really need the other stuff for the most part.
For the most part, yeah.
So
You made the tapping reminded me. Uh, just and this is the dumbest thing ever, but they put it in, and I love it. Um, is and this happens when you're holding your attack and it's charging up your 360 swing, which is your
mhm.
most powerful attack. But if you're holding it there and you go across something, he'll start tapping it with his sword.
Yeah, it does
And
the poke, poke, poke.
yeah, and just the fact that walls that you can bomb sound hollow
Mhm.
Oh yeah.
is such a great touch. That and normally you see cracks in the wall and that gives you an indication that this might be bombable, or if it's really weak you can just run into it and break the wall down, which is hilarious as well. But yeah, if you're low on bombs and you just want to make sure you can tap it, and such a uh, such a clever little touch that they did not need to put in, but they did.
That
Yeah.
kind of goes back to like the fact that just masterful sound design.
Yeah.
It's like that's, and that is, I think that this is a game that in so many ways, like there are so many little attention to detail moments in it. And even with like the frustrations of some of like the dated boss designs and everything else, like this is a game that really, I think, in Nintendo, I don't know, like I look back at this one and I'm like, this is kind of where Nintendo set the bar and said like, no, like we're just like, this thing's going to ooze quality. And I think for the most part when it comes to their first party titles, like that's what they do now. Like this was like, and it's like you said, Super Mario World, um it's not as polished, but like this is like basically them really leaning into and sort of like pushing I mean, it had a special cart with more memory on it,
Hmm.
and stuff like that. So it's like, this is like, to me, this is like the Nintendo, this is a Nintendo high watermark. And again, where it's sort of like, and well, and I think it goes back to like where we were sort of talking about, like they could have ended this game so much earlier and it would have been fine. But like the
Yeah.
attention to detail, like the moving flowers and the different, just the beautiful sprites and all of that stuff. And then like, yeah, the little stuff where it's like, hey, you can poke the wall, and hollow walls make a different sound than a normal wall. And like, just it's that attention to detail that's like, these are little things that you did not have to do. And it's like that high threshold, that high bar of quality, that's pretty freaking spectacular. Like I don't know, like this game is definitely a must play. And I think and so I think that kind of leads us to a place where we do, you know, and ultimately Josh and I will probably have to wrestle with this in the coming weeks maybe. But I don't, it is one of the greatest games of all time, right? So in theory, we should probably try and make room for it on the list, on our top 100 list. But at the same time, it's kind of like, while this is like a must play game, this is like a formative game. It's like, I think I guess what I'm saying, Josh, is I think when we do sort of go over the top 100 list, we've got some work cut out for us. Like I don't know that we have too many games that we've played this year where we're like, yeah, this totally belongs on the list, that aren't already on there. But this one, it's like, in sort of going through this again, I'm like, we need to maybe like revisit this thing and maybe and again, I'm not even sure it belongs on our list, because of our criteria and like just the weird up and down nature of our list. But it's a fun one to think about, to wrestle with.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that'll be fun to have a conversation about. I still, I still like A Link Between Worlds a lot as well. So that might come up in that conversation as
Mm.
well. I do, we're talking about how great this game is, and it really is. I mean, what's amazing is that this is another one of those games where back in these days, sequels did not have to be similar to the games that they were before. You think of this and this Zelda series. I think it's similar to like Mario Brothers and Castlevania are two game series that I can think of where the first games kind of set the formula and they were a little crude, a little rough around the edges, but they set the formula and they did a really good job for just like creating maybe not a totally new genre, but something close to it. The second games were wild experiments, and then the
Mhm.
third games went back and without completely being remakes, they polished that original formula and expanded it out so much more. So Mario Brothers 3 to the Super Mario Brothers, I think is a fantastic example of that. I like Castlevania 3 more than the first one, even though I think the first one is iconic. It just does so much branching paths, different characters, all kinds of crazy stuff there. And I think this one does something similar where it takes that original Zelda formula, but does everything better than
Yeah.
that first one, and expands it and brings it into new territory.
I
Um,
think too, like just sort of in touching on that though, too, like when you look at those jumps from like the original like Mario Brothers to Mario Brothers 2. Now, of course, that was Doki Doki Panic and everything else, but they
sure.
did
Yeah, that's
integrate
true.
things like you know what I'm saying, where they like Mario's jump and just the ability to fly and all of the extra abilities, like and to pick up a shell.
Mhm.
Like I believe that and again, this is sort of more of a theory versus like fact, where it's like that's stuff like where it's like that's actually probably carryovers from Super Mario Brothers too. It's like what if we took this and we put it into the next one?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
like and I think
And you
it's
see that with magic in Zelda.
yeah.
We talked about how you don't use it that much, but I think it's directly inspired by the second game. Yeah.
Yep.
And it's even like I think there are some things like just the necessity of the lantern and everything else. I don't know, like and the ability to light up. I think there were ideas that they started to tackle in Link's Adventure that they really fleshed out, like, and they really played with. Now, like, yes,
Yeah.
obviously they went back to a completely like the top down thing, but I, I think too it's like it's interesting to think that like in some ways now it's pretty limited, but like Link to the Past is a very vertical game. Like there's terrain and like I was just thinking about like the fact that like you can drop down. Now sometimes you drop down like there's the like some of the dungeons where it's like drop down in this hole and you don't know if it's like there's a goodie underneath or if there's like this is just a death hole. And
Yeah.
sometimes there's that little like guessing game. But just like even coming out of Kakariko Village, like it kind of sits up and you can just like drop off a cliff and there isn't much that's again that's more of a little touch than something else, but like even that sense of verticality, like that's there were in Link 2 there were platforms and like there, when you were going up and down the levels in the caves, and I'm wondering like how much of it was like trying to maybe like add some of that back in or capture some of that same feeling where it's like I don't know. I don't see it's a lot harder to see like the touch points, and I guess that's kind of a question that I would like you guys are all way more familiar with uh Link's Adventure than I am. We've talked about that.
Mhm.
What do you think that like the sort of like what was the stuff that maybe got brought forward from that into A Link to the Past?
I think one of them, and this is the I think the best part about Zelda 2 is the sword play, where you could get into actual duels. in A Link to the Past, like your sword has an arc and it can be blocked. And you can block the guard's sword,
Mm,
and it don't use it as much as Zelda 2, but it's not just a simple like Zelda 1, if you're close enough you hit,
yeah,
and if you're too close it hits you, uh type thing. But especially with the guards who have like weapons and shields,
yeah.
um if you get them at a certain angle, then you're guaranteed a hit. If you go at a different angle, then they might be able to block it.
Hmm.
um and so you do get a lot of that, and you become aware of your sword's arc. Even in just a basic attack, it is a swipe, it's not a jab.
Yeah. Well, and that the positioning too. Like I was just thinking about like how like yeah, you need to kind of be like in the map. You need to be like above the knights,
Right,
or the
exactly.
castle
Yep.
guards. Like yeah, or sort of off at an angle. Yeah, and obviously like Josh, like you mentioned, like the magic coming forward. But um,
Hmm.
yeah, I just think it's a really special game, and I forgot how special it was. And
Hmm.
so for that reason alone, and granted, I got to it a lot later than I should have, um, but I'm glad that you put this one back on the table, Paul. Um, it's been a lot of times. Well, and it's funny we talk about like a lot of times you go back and like things just don't live up to their expectations. And I think what's kind of interesting is that this playthrough, I think I'm enjoying it more
Hmm.
Hmm.
um, than I, which is odd. It's like a lot of times you go back and you're like, oh, this is fine. Like this is, or this is still good, but it kind of like some of the shine has worn off. And this is a game where, like, yes, there are some problems,
Yeah.
but and like we talked about, like there's kind of bloat where it's like a lot of like there's a lot of stuff in the game that just doesn't need to be there. But yeah,
Yeah, I'd say also the some of the stuff that you have to do in the overworld that the game doesn't. To me, it never hinted that you had to do it. So even getting some of the medallions in order to
hmm,
progress is a little opaque. Like
Hmm.
you know, and maybe that's just me. Maybe it's because I wasn't using the fortune tellers or things like that. So
no, the
I'm
game
sure there are
doesn't
ways
do a
around
great
it.
job of like this is definitely that's definitely one part of the game where it's just like it's not super clear.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
Well, yeah, and that like it's tough to for me to say, because uh, it was such a unique atmosphere playing games in that era,
hmm
where we were talking about this stuff all the time. Of like we were
and
all
not
playing
on
this
the
game,
internet.
right? Yeah, just y- yeah, like my cousin had the game a little bit before I did, and but all my friends were playing this game too. And so that summer we were talking about it, and then we also had Nintendo Power, and and eventually Nintendo, I think it was Nintendo Power, released like a strategy book for it, so you can kind of clean up all the heart pieces that you that you
Mm.
missed on it. But this was a game like, and this is something I like, the how long to beat on these old games is such crap. Like, it's like, you could beat this game in 20 hours. We spent way more on the 20 hours on a playthrough,
sure,
the first
yeah,
playthrough of this, because, this is just how we played games back then.
Yeah.
We, uh, w- in this game, we would see a ledge, and it's like, okay, how do I get there?
How do I get up there? Yep.
Right, and in the map itself, and it has some really neat physical clues a lot of times. So, like, if you see a ring of bushes, um, use the mirror in the middle of the ring. It's
Yeah.
probably going to be something good. It's stuff like that, that you can find, and so we were just digging into the world. And if you dig into the world, then you end up finding those slabs with the Hylian writing on it, and then later you
Mhm.
get the book to translate, and you're like, wait, I remember there was a slab, you know, over in the desert or on the mountain or something. Let me go back there, and um, this is why it took us so long to beat the stupid game. But this is the way this is the way we played them. It was.
Yeah.
I spent so much time just exploring the overworld of this game and trying to, pick out every nook and cranny out of it.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a and it's I think too it's like even so you mentioned like the mirror and sort of like sometimes like just even the use of that is kind of like clever where it's like you when you transfer over to the dark world and well and again when you try to get to the Tower of Hera like you have to do that in order to get to the tower, but then like it's like yeah there's that like weird like you spend like 10-15 minutes like being like how do I get up this ledge, and then when you get the mirror you're like oh hey I can pop over into the dark world, and then and it's like that's sort of like yeah
Yeah,
there's a lot of charm in that. And it's a really sort of interesting, not interesting, but it's a really masterful like reusal of or reuse of assets, because it's like it's not like they created a whole nother world. They just sort of gave you the same map, but
right.
they tweaked it. Um, and that I think that's kind of brilliant. Like
Hmm.
there's a lot of like it's this is in a lot of ways a very subtle game, very smart game, and it feels a lot bigger than it actually is. I think a lot of the time.
My favorite use of the two worlds is you are very likely very early to run across the ghostly figure of the kid in the woods, on who's sitting on the stump,
Yes.
and uh, you're not going to find him for a long time until you're exploring the dark world. And the reason he's a ghostly figure in the light world is he's in the dark world, and he got lost and is over there. But in the dark world, then he'll tell you kind of why he's in the game, you know, and that's where the flute is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the
You get the
flute
you get
is that he had
the
dropped the flute um, in the light world, and so then you come back in the light world with a shovel and dig it up. Um, but just a really nice use of showing you something. It's like, look, there is something here. You'll find it later. You'll
yeah.
figure it out. But there's something going on here. This place is special. I love that. I love that particular scene.
Yeah, it's a and it's just yeah, the game is full of that kind of stuff. But anyways, um Wesley, you've been kind of quiet over there. Any thoughts, anything that we have
I
missed
feel
that you feel needs to be addressed?
I mean, I was just sitting back and enjoying the show. Honestly, it's like this is like front row seat to like a live show. Come on, but I
Yeah.
mean, I
I
would
felt so bad. I see all three of y'all just like dozing off, and I'm like, okay, I'll keep talking then.
Well,
no,
um
I'm enjoying it. But I mean, kind of going back to what you guys are saying, I could definitely. It's interesting having played it so much as a kid, and then recently coming back to it and having my kids sit with me as I'm playing it, and of course I'm just kind of
yeah.
like automatically going through the game. I'm like, oh, okay, so you do this first, and okay, you go the underground to the dungeon, you rescue the princess, bring it back all the way to the sanctuary, da 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 da, and I'm like, I know the steps like the back of my hand. But then my kids are just like, what's that? What are you doing? Why don't you stop over there?
Right.
Go search over that. Yeah, why don't you do that thing? It's like, why are you running this way? And I'm like, I know how this game works. It's like, well, my son's just like, well, let me try then. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, you know how to do it. And so, he takes control. He's like 8 years old now, so he could pretty easily handle it. And it was just interesting watching him and my daughter. They could just play it for hours and hours and hours if I let them. And all they're doing is like they just want to chop the bush down to see if anything pops out. Whoa, that bush has a rupee. I'm gonna get
We
that.
spent
Yeah.
a
That bush has
we
a
spent
heart.
a lot of time chopping bushes.
Exactly.
I'd find the overgrown lawn in Kakariko.
Hmm.
I mowed that lawn so much.
Yeah, dude.
for free.
It's super satisfying.
It
It's
is.
super satisfying.
So
Um,
it's just interesting how they default to this natural exploratory phase when it's just like this is just for them. It's new, it's unique, it's different. I'd never played it in
well,
front
and
of them.
that's probably how like we interacted with it then, and it
Mhm.
just but now we kind of like come back to it revisiting. But yeah, it is A Link to the Past is something special. It
Yeah.
really is. It really really is. So
Well, that's like the and I have I don't know that this story is true. I don't think it is, but when Breath of the Wild came out, there was a story going around that they had presented it to Miyamoto, and he started climbing trees, and they're like, "Don't you want to explore?" And he goes, "No." He just climbed more trees. I
Seems
mean, and
sensible. Yeah.
this is it does say something about like his style that like look, if the mechanics are fun, the game is fun.
Mhm.
yeah,
If
Mhm.
chopping down the bushes is fun, then the game is fun.
Mhm.
yeah.
And if in Breath of the Wild, if climbing trees are fun, then you've got something here. And but yeah, we would cut down
But
so many bushes. So many.
dude,
Oh man.
Link was like Link is probably single handedly responsible for the reason why I abhor lawn care. Um, yeah, but that and yeah, well, but Josh, sort of anything that you wanted to sort of get out there before we kind of really land this plane, like any thoughts that is there anything that we missed?
The only thing we didn't necessarily we talked about sound effects, but music is fantastic. It sets
Mhm.
it's foundational in the same ways that a number of things throughout this game is foundational, but so many of the themes, the overworld theme, things like that appear again and again and again that's just classic Zelda music at this point. That was brought in with this game is just fantastic. So music
Yeah.
is definitely a highlight here. And I think this playthrough too make sense that what is it, Super Metroid was very influenced by this game, because you think of the tool progression or weapon progression that you get opens up different areas of the
Mm,
overworld, which allows you to get different things, which then allows you to progress to different areas. Like, it makes a lot of sense that this was kind of the reference for Super Metroid and things like that. So those are
It really
the only
it
last
really
two
is like
thoughts.
a Metroidvania style. Um
I didn't want to
Before.
say that because I already compared Punch Out to Dark Souls. so
but
It's
it's
so
a
got that
Souls like Metroidvania like.
you need the tool
right,
to
yeah,
you need the tool to progress to the next area or
yeah,
whatever, and that sort of it's like keys without being keys kind of
yeah,
thing,
yeah.
which
Right.
is I
Well,
mean, and again, it's like you said, Super Metroid referenced this game in a lot of ways
mhm.
in sort of that design philosophy. So maybe you could say that we shouldn't call them Metroidvanias, that we should call them Link likes.
Oh my goodness. And
Right.
I might even be getting that confused. It might have been Symphony of the Night, the creators of Symphony of the Night, who had referenced The Legend of Zelda. I could be wrong about that. I can't remember if it
But
was.
that's
That's the formula, right?
that's the Vania part of Metroidvania.
Right,
Like,
right, exactly. Which is why I'm getting them confused. I don't
Yeah.
remember which one in particular the creators of the games said that. Oh no, it wasn't. It's not kind of the obvious um, correlation. It's A Link to the Past is where we got a lot of these concepts from.
yeah,
So,
Yeah.
but
On the score, just real quick,
mhm.
I love Zelda 2's music, but Koji Kondo did not do that game, and so this is his
mhm.
second Zelda score, and just how much he expands the music out in this, it's from that opening theme, the use of the
Right.
harps and
Yep.
everything, it uh it it has that kind of sound of adventure and mystery to the
Hmm.
whole way.
Oh,
I love
Yep.
it.
Yeah.
well, that's why I posted that GIF up of the opening earlier in the Discord
Yeah.
because it's like
That you can hear, like
you
I
can
was
hear
hearing
this.
that
Yes,
harp go,
Yes.
Yeah. That's well, and
100%.
it's like, yeah, I think that's the thing is like we sort of did sort of references, but like this is the benchmark for all those sounds in my head. Like, yes, a lot of them come from original Legend of Zelda, but like I hear A Link to the Past version.
Yep.
Mhm.
Like it, like when I remember that, it's like, the theme, the opening theme, like the overworld, theme. Like that's, I hear the Link to the Past version of those number, even though there's like, it's sort of the same iterations, like it's all like, and that's like one of the things I love about Zelda is that it is like very iterative in that regard. Like it's like they sort of like they have this like musical theme and that's just where it stays. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, so
Absolutely.
just, but I think that you basically you called us all out because we were starting to get become sleepy boys.
I'm trying to open a door for you to exit.
Yeah, and I think that yeah, this is probably an okay place to land this. This is, how about before we sort of move into closing forms, I'm going to ask one question. I want when you guys like on I think we would all agree to like that this is a must play game. I I want to hear like what is the one sort of like okay, this is a must play. Here's the one thing that like what's the one thing that people playing this for the first time or maybe revisiting it for the first time in a long time, like what's like the one sort of like takeaway or the one like pay attention to this when you're playing this game, pay attention to this thing. um like, and like for me it's like, and again I'll just sort of, it's like pay attention to the small things. Like this game is again it is a sort of a master of minutia. It's like, the small animations, just the attention to detail in ways that did not need to be there. And I think that's a bit of a marvel. Like,
Mhm.
that adds a sense of life. And I think that that's one of the things where it's like the gameplay is good. Like the gameplay is fun, level design, aside from the ice palace. Because like I said, that thing can go suck rocks and kick farts. Um, but that was a good. But it's like there's just a ton of minutia in this game that actually really adds life to it. Um, and so that would be like my like, hey, yeah, I think if you haven't played this and you have the opportunity to do so, do it, and like just kind of like look at what they were doing, sort of like, pay attention to the little bits. Um, Wes, like what, I'm gonna put you on the spot. What's like the one thing that's like, hey, if you're when you play this again, or if you're gonna play this for the first time, keep your eyes on, or excuse me, you're gonna have to edit that out in post, Josh. But what would be your sort of like, hey, pay attention to this?
Well, whether you are revisiting the game or whether you're playing it for the first time, you will hear this little playground rumor of a room that is called the Chris Hallahan room. Don't go for it. It's a lie. Don't waste your time. It's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of, and I cannot believe it's an actual real thing. But that's it. But anyway, yeah, okay. Other than that, something actually serious. We didn't even talk about the room. It's crazy how we went
Oh,
the
there was no
entire time.
time. I know. That is like that is such a moment in 91, 92, or specifically 91 history
Mhm.
that like that could only be explained by if you like you could only understand it if you lived it.
Yeah,
'Cause-
yeah, it's crazy. But I mean, seriously, I feel like the minutia of the game is probably its strongest point, like down to like the little individual pixels that help you figure out the way to go here, the way to go there. It's absolutely amazing, and all of that blended together with some of the smoothest animation like you've ever seen in a video game. Like just every time Link swings a sword, it's just like absolute like it's just clean and smooth and beautiful. It's a work of art. So I don't know, it is beautiful. It's just a beautiful game. Pay attention to the art style. Pay attention to everything around you. It's drink it in, experience it. Don't just go from
Yeah.
point A to point B. Enjoy it while you can.
Joshua, what's your sort of
Well, it's sort of an amalgamation of what's already been said, and actually that last line, Wes, that you were saying, that's kind of what it is. Is just go explore. Like, don't think of this game as like, okay, as a list of things you need to do. Like, what's the next thing on the list I need to do in order to finish the game? Like, because you can go to your map and the temples are blinking, they're numbered, so you know
Yeah.
where to go. Don't just be focused on the next thing, but I would say actually go out and explore, and it's going to help you because then you'll understand the world and how it all works together. You're going to find those things that are probably necessary for some point in the game. You're going to pick up heart pieces. Like, you're always going to be rewarded, so go explore.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Paul.
That was actually going to be what I said too. Is you find stuff in the weirdest places in this game, and so like if you're looking at something and you say, I could stand there. How do I get there? There's a way to get there.
Yeah.
And a lot of time it's, like pay attention to the connection between the light and the dark world. Um, there's paths open in one world that aren't open in the other.
Mhm.
And if you find yourself on a ledge, go ahead and use the mirror just to see where you're going to end up.
Mhm.
If there's if it's nothing, you can always go back. The mirror leaves a spot for you to just jump right back. But once you get
The
once you get
sparkles.
yeah, once you get Zora's flippers, go swimming everywhere. Go under the bridges, go into the waterfalls. Um, there's probably something there.
Yeah.
And there's so much little stuff, and you're gonna run into countless things. It's like, okay, there's a big rock there. I'm gonna need one of the mitts to get past it. Mental note: you'll come back later for it, or the little pegs that you need the hammer to get through. Just to make a mental note of that it's there, and you can come back later, and you'll find some just wild stuff in every corner of the map.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's I think those are that's some pretty good advice. But Josh, I think I think since Paul has opened the door for us to land this plane, or to wrap this thing up, I think that it is only fair that we sort of oblige him. So we need to start wrapping it up. Um, so I do think that we probably ought to just sort of touch base and do a bit of a challenge update.
Ah,
Here comes a new challenger.
Or actually, it's kind of an old challenger talking, but
mhm.
and I'll just sort of like run into mine real quick. It's like I had talked about praying through the Psalms. I did not do that as consistently as I wanted to, so I'm gonna put that back on the docket and say like that's something that I want to develop. I am using basically a plan that comes out of the Book of Common Prayer. So,
Nice.
but yeah.
Nice.
So
Yeah, mine was to be calorie counting, and I have not been great at that. I've been decent at just what I put in my body in general, but I haven't been counting calories, so not doing too well there. I think for the next challenge, though, I've just been convicted lately about memorizing scripture. I haven't been doing that in quite a while, and so I need to get into a regular rhythm where I spend some time just memorizing some scripture. So that's my
yeah,
challenge for next time.
good. Alrighty. Well, yeah, we need to land the plane. So, uh, you know, Josh, what happens? What do we do next? I'm starting to fry here, man.
Well,
my brains are
Yep.
just going.
Nate's
As
current
we-
challenge
as
is
we-
staying awake.
Yeah.
As we fade off into the distance, Wes, Paul, thank you guys for coming on. Thank you, especially Paul, for recommending this game. It was fun to play through again this year because it's been quite a while since I've played
Yeah.
it. So I enjoyed it quite a bit. Appreciate you guys. Is there, and obviously we talked about your podcasts earlier. Is there any way, I don't know if you want people to get a hold of you or anything you want to plug before we head out for the evening?
Yes.
Just find me on Discord. I'm there.
Discord.
That's pretty much all I'm doing.
Yeah.
Right. Technofunk Boy and LRT and Gates on Twitter. We'll
Okay.
hear more about LRT and Gates.
Yeah.
Right after I finish this stupid album.
Nice. Nice.
Cool.
And is that the
Cool,
same
cool.
on Blue Sky as well? No, I'm just kidding.
Right.
All right. All right.
You
Well,
know what they say: if your boyfriend has Blue Sky account, then you have a girlfriend.
that is
Womp
what they
womp.
say. All right, guys. Well, thank you for sticking with us. Keep beating down your backlogs, and we'll keep breaking down the benefits.
See, but are they going to be hearing my song during this time at the end?
If you make it
No, yours-
downloadable, because it's
I
not
think
downloadable right now.
Your
not
song
downloadable?
actually needs to go
And-
after the
Ad
ad
read?
spot break.
Okay.
Yeah.
It should be downloadable. That's weird.
Okay, because I can.
Do you
Like
want the
I
new
can
one or
share
the
it?
older one?
Is there?
But
I'm pretty sure this is a new one.
Okay, because I can click download. No
Is it
problem.
just that I'm not?
can you
Way
send
at the
that,
bottom?
Can you send that to him, Wes?
Probably.
Can you send him like the downloadable?
Yeah. Does it have to be? Can you only download it if it's your own? I don't know, because maybe because I know we're
think.
friends.
But are we?
Yeah.
You sure about that?
You're like that. You're like that Voyager
You
meme.
sure about that?
Are you two friends?
Yes. There you go. This is the remastered version. If you want, I'm sending it in the ponies chat
Okay.
where Nate
Sweet.
just sent his delightful. Delightful. Okay, there you
That
Generate.
about sums it up for me.
go.
Like,
That's fair.
you know,
That's
you
fair.
guys, that's like that is my sort of like outlook at humanity. Yeah, just like
Mhm.
it's funny because that showed up on my Facebook feed as you guys were basically harassing me for being racist.
Your phone's listening.
Like that, I had a friend share that, and I was like, "Yeah, no, that's apropos. Maybe I'm not as aggressive, like actively aggressive, but that's how I feel. It's like I don't care if you're fat or skinny. I don't care if you're black, white, red, blue. I don't care if like you want to I don't care about what kind of genitals you want to rub up on. I don't care.
No,
I
I
hate
care
you
about
all
that. I
equally.
do care about that one.
I don't care about any of it. It's like I hate you all equally. That